Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast, the NBA edition. It is Friday the 13th. I don't know if you're superstitious, but always an interesting day. Justin is not going to be on this podcast. He's working on models, trying to get them in tip-top shape for tonight. So Jay and I are taking a break and going to pod for you guys as usual on Friday. Jay, how's it going, man?
Good, man. I totally overlooked the Friday the 13th correlation there, but maybe that's why the slate is so rough. It's not looking good after looking at it extensively. But yeah, I'm doing well though. I'm having flashbacks to last season's pod schedule we got Hazonia entering the rotation, and then we got Boban just murdering fools.
That's right. No, really. I mean, Boban. A slate with Boban is the best slate. So.
Oh, there's nothing better. I mean, I want to cash him so bad. So bad.
It's what a spot to do it today too.
Yeah. We'll get into him though.
Yeah. It is a really interesting slate. Just as far as the games go and the players. I mean, these prices are somewhat interesting. So, definitely a good slate for us to break down because I think today is a challenge. I would say. So we'll use our regular schedule here. We'll hit some injuries, and then we're going to talk a couple games. The highest total one pretty significantly is Nets and Raptors, but the spread is so huge. It's started open at 15, and it's already gone up to 16 in Toronto's favor. So we're not going to do that one just because of the large spread, but we'll definitely touch on those players in the position breakdowns, which we'll do after the game. So the games we're going to talk about is going to be Portland is at home taking on the Magic, and then the other game that we're going to talk about is the Thunder in Minnesota taking on the Wolves. So games not necessarily with the highest totals, but they do have close spreads, and I think they're interesting teams to discuss. Portland just because of where they're at with getting some of their starters back after their big win over the Cavs. Orlando with some of their rotation changes, and then Thunder Wolves is always sort of interesting with those young elite players. So let's jump right into injuries. Jay, can you run us through the notable ones for today?
Yeah, for sure. We'll start with Nicholas Batum is back after missing a few games with a hyperextend right knee. Jeremy Lamb has been ruled out with a foot injury. Cody Zeller is probable. He's not on the injury report, so I would expect him to return tonight from an illness that sidelined him. Joel Embiid is probable with the sprained left ankle. He went through shoot-around, said his ankle's fine. He's resting tomorrow, so yeah, fully expect him to play tonight. Patrick Patterson was held out of practice with a strained right knee. You can consider him questionable. Josh Richardson ruled out again, still in a walking boot. Willie Reed questionable with a bruised sternum. Giannis will play, said he's fine after missing last game. Playing only 8 minutes last game, missing a game before. Eric Gordon will return tonight with that sprained left toe. Zach LaVine is going to be a game-time decision. Definitely big news to monitor with that left hip contusion. Avery Bradley has been ruled out again with the Achilles injury. Amir Johnson and Jaylen Brown are both will try to play. They're going through shoot-around with sprained ankles. Mike Dunleavy is available to make his Hawks debut today. And Serge Ibaka is on track to play with that sore right shoulder. And then from last night, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, sore left shoulder, x-rays were negative, but he's doubtful to play tonight. And then John Lure remains sidelined.
Yeah, that game, we'll hit on that, but a brutal game. The Pistons-Jazz game with injured guys and just the slow paces in defense. 190 total, which is just easily the lowest one. So probably a one to avoid, but we'll get into that. So let's start with let's start with the Magic and the Blazers. It's the later of the two. This one starts at 10 Eastern. The other one's at 8 Eastern, but we'll just go reverse order here. So, I mean, obviously interesting news in Orlando just with rotation, just being revamped a little bit. They've said that they're going to give Hazonia a couple more minutes, which obviously impacts the guards, specifically Fournier. And, it even sort of trickles into the value of, Peyton and even Gordon if they're going to play him on the wing. But also Nikola Vucevic is going to start, which I think that we can talk about, if his value is better off the bench or starting because he's been playing really hot right now and sort of a good matchup. But this is a game that I definitely want to discuss because of the revamped rosters, but also because on paper it seems like this is a good game to target in DFS. I mean, these are two teams with below average defenses, or Orlando's sort of around the 20 mark. Portland, we know, is in the bottom 3 as far as defensive efficiency. But then you look sort of up and down the guys you want to roster, and it's sort of oddly fair as far as, guys that you want to target tonight. Are you sort of seeing the same thing, Jay?
Yeah, definitely. I like talking about this game. And, with Orlando, different coach, same team with rotation differences. It's going to be interesting. Vogel came out and said New Magic are going to be playing a lot more small ball, go lineups that don't really feature 2 big men as often as he has been. More Jeff Green at the 4, which puts Mario Hezonja as the primary backup small forward behind Aaron Gordon. So it'll be interesting for sure. One thing with Vooch, he has performed better on a fantasy points basis off the bench than as a starter. But you're right, he's been playing well, and I do like this matchup. But, looking at this game kind of overall, it's still, when you get down to the players, player by player, it kind of, outside of Hezonja, of course, in cash, it's kind of just mostly tournament plays. And I think with the rotation for things like this, I kind of, at least in cash, I definitely like to take a wait and see approach of how many minutes are these guys going to get. That front court with Ibaka, Vooch, and Biyombo, if they're going to play small, how many minutes are these guys going to go, and is there downside if you're risking cash? In tournaments, I think you definitely want to take chances. I like Ibaka's price point on DK. I believe he's cheaper. And then with Portland, they have been, I mentioned it on the last few pods, but they have been playing significantly better defenses of late.
With the Mina back, right?
Yeah, and you look at Orlando's offense, it's just not getting any better. They're still 27th in offensive rating this season. So I like the changes. I mean, you got to try something new with this offense, and we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, usually playing small, when a team plays small and they get more shooting on the floor or just play at a faster pace, usually the offense is going to be a little bit better. That's just how NBA offenses work. So I think there might be some potential for that offensive efficiency mark to move up a little bit for Orlando, but it doesn't sort of make sense in this game. Like, this is the one game where you would potentially want to stay big. I mean, Portland has some of the worst, post defense, interior defense with Plumlee. It's just not a rim protector. So, of all games, this would be a game where if you knew Vooch and you knew Ibaka were going to get big minutes and they were going to go 2 bigs, this would be a really intriguing spot for both of them. But since Orlando's going to go small, it just sort of evens out the value, sort of kills the value in all these guys. So I do think that you can, take some chances. I do like Ibaka on DK. He's much cheaper there. And I even like Vooch in tournaments. He's a little bit better on FanDuel than DraftKings. But, he's been playing so well that, maybe he can just take advantage of Plumlee, even in the starting rotation, even though he's been better off the bench. But, it really is interesting, just the fact that the small ball should help their offense, but probably may not help their DFS value in this particular game.
It's tough. I mean, I like Aaron Gordon's price a lot on FanDuel, 4,900 still, but with Vooch returning the starting lineup, it kind of makes me get off him. He has an 18.7 usage rate when on the court with Vooch, and when they're off, he jumps up to 22.6. So, kind of off him even at that favorable price. And then, the Portland guys are probably more intriguing to me with Lillard's price on FanDuel just got slashed massively. So he's automatically one of the top plays at that price point.
83 is silly.
Yeah, he got cut a lot. And then I still like McCollum quite a bit at 32.8% usage rate this month. Lillard 26.5, and that's kind of the main two, kind of how we've seen all season. Plumlee's a distant third. I know a lot of people have been going Al-Farouq Aminu on FanDuel, but his price went from 4,600 to 5,800. So he's kind of out of play now. He's been averaging 11.5 rebounds the last 4 games and really playing well. But I don't expect that to continue anyways. I'm kind of happy his price jumped up.
Yeah, the interesting guy, I mean, Lillard's pretty easy at this price. I think even on DK as well, he's fine. But the interesting guy is McCollum, just because something that we mentioned last pod is usually when you have two really high usage guys, one goes out for a couple games, the other one takes over, puts up nice games, sort of like Durant and Westbrook last year. When Durant was out, Westbrook would take over, and his salary would inflate as well. And then when Durant would come back, the market would have to readjust, and Westbrook would be overpriced. We thought the same thing was going to happen with McCollum, but really Lillard's return hasn't really pushed into McCollum's usage. Really, it's just sort of hurt the other wings. Aminu and Harkless, these guys have been been decent DFS assets because of their peripheral stats. But as far as the usage goes, it almost seemed like McCollum just got a lot of confidence without Lillard, and then they just Stotts just decided to let Lillard and McCollum just keep on gunning away, as opposed to let Lillard sort of just take over. So it's almost like they're 1A 1B, as opposed to Lillard being the top dog and McCollum being behind him. So I think McCollum's ownership has dipped quite a bit lately because of that reason, because of his price, but definitely a nice spot to take him. Other guys, we'll quickly move on here. I think that, like you said, I think Harkless is potentially interesting, but in a 9-game slate, he sort of profiles as a cash game play, and I think he's a fine cash game play. But in a 9-game slate, it's a little thin, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to go him really, but we'll get into this when we get into positional breakdowns, but small forward is pretty rough. Multiple positions are really rough today, really. So I think Harkless is a legit option. A small forward at his price point with how bad it is, but it's not something I'm trying to go for sure. I'd like to avoid that a lot, but you do have the revenge game factor.
It's true. No, that is a good point.
I don't think it's amounted to anything, though.
And I hate. We talked about it. We hate the crab play, but he's getting shots up, and he's still only low 4Ks on FanDuel. It's if he's going to take that many shots and play 32, 33 minutes and be a legit part of the rotation that's used in the offense, you at least have to consider him here.
Yeah, and then Plumlee again is just underpriced on DK, so I don't mind a decent amount of tournament exposure to him, kind of save up there. For sure. So let's move on to this next game here, which is going to be the Thunder at the Timberwolves. And I actually think there's quite a few plays here. I think the most interesting ones are sort of the OKC big men. But let's start with OKC. Actually, OKC's on the road at Minnesota. It's a pretty close spread game. The total's not super high. It's at 207. But it's only a two point spread here in the Thunder's favor. So I think some potentially interesting guys, just with their price points, I think are just a little bit too low for a lot of these guys. So starting with OKC, you have Westbrook, who's just always a play just because of his massive high floor. He has a floor of 40 points in our models right now, which is just ridiculous. That's higher than the median projections for most point guards. And then you have Oladipo, who I think continues just his price on FanDuel is just ridiculously low and just won't get up there. And then, like I mentioned, these big men. Both Adams and Cantor have just been dominating lately. So this is a really nice spot, in my opinion, to load up, even though the implied total is not super high, to take some chances on a lot of these Thunder guys. What are your thoughts on them? Yeah, I definitely like the front court. And then Russ. I think Depot at this point, on this slate, I agree he's in cash game consideration. But I think at this point he's more of a tournament play. But yeah, shooting guard is similar to small forward in that it's very, very difficult. McCollum's priced up. It's hard to get him. Harden's facing Memphis.
The problem is he profiles as a cash game play. He hasn't really flashed.
Yeah, he does.
So I wouldn't really roll deeper that much in tournaments. If I was going to play him, I would play him in cash on FanDuel, but I wouldn't play him in tournaments on DK, in really low exposure tournaments on FanDuel as well. So he's sort of tough just because his price sort of puts him in cash game consideration.
Yeah, his price and the scarcity of the position definitely make him there. But yeah, I think Adams is the guy who stands out to me quite a bit. 11.68 plus minus on FanDuel in the 2 games these teams have met this season already. Cat has by far the worst defensive real plus minus among all centers. I know Jang starts at center and plays there, but Cat still logs minutes there. And with the history of the season, with Adams paying off his price pretty easily, I like him quite a bit. He's probably my favorite per dollar play on this team. Russ, on the other hand, is extremely expensive now. It's the third highest he's been this season on FanDuel, 12.8. He's averaged 56 FanDuel points per game against them in the 2 previous games. So it's going to be up to kind of how you're going to afford him. I think on this slate, we don't really have that many high-priced guys that are in above-average spots. So it's going to be tough. I think at that price, though, it makes it really, really difficult without any strong value plays kind of at this point. And then Cantor, I mean, he's been slaughtering again. He's crushed both games against them this season too, and he's going to get 9 points tonight.
He might. Yeah.
It's what he does.
No, for sure.
There's a reason he's not like a cash play every night. It's because the one night you're on, it leaves a sour taste in everybody's mouth when you take it. When you have a lot of Cantor exposure is when he really lets you down. But I want to have pretty heavy tournament exposure to him for sure.
No, I mean, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he had 43 DraftKings points against the Grizzlies, who are probably the best defense in the league last game. So, I mean, if he can do that against the Grizzlies, what can he do against this really poor defensive? With Jang and Cat, who do have defensive potential. We're not saying that Cat's like an awful defender, but
no.
At 21, he hasn't quite figured that out yet. Yeah, I like the Cantor call. You really have to get some exposure to him in tournaments. I mean, he's averaging 1.2 fantasy points per minute on DK, which is ridiculous. I mean, yeah, he's crazy. I mean, that's like a similar mark to Cat. The difference between the two is that Cat just gets more minutes, but he's also like 5,000 more expensive than him.
Right.
So. But if you're just looking as far as from like a DFS efficiency standpoint, like they're very similar players, which no one would guess. I don't think.
Right.
So yeah, I think we agree on a lot of those guys. Especially those 4 main guys for Oklahoma City are worthy of tournament exposure, and you could probably even talk me into some Steven Adams and potentially Depot cash game exposure.
I agree. You want to talk about your boy Robertson? You were taunting me with him, man. He finished pretty bad the other night.
He finished with 20 DK points. I mean, he exceeded salary-based expectations by 35 points. He has exceeded salary-based expectations in his last 4 games.
It's so weak. If you want 18 points, go ahead.
It's so thin. I agree. It's so thin. I think he did start out. He had like 8 and 4.
I know. Yeah, I was pretty tilted with that.
So I had to send Jay a message.
Yeah, it's rough. Let's talk about some of these Wolves guys, though.
So obviously the big news here is Levine's status. And one thing that we've been talking about quite a bit, especially in my pieces, and also I've been really high on correlations. I've been putting out these correlation charts and talking about them in my breakdowns. If you just look at the Wolves, Levine and Andrew Wiggins have one of the strongest negative correlations in the NBA among starters. So really, at this point, you should really never use them together unless it's like an absolute nuts matchup. But it sort of, which makes it applicable today is when one of them is out, you really want to be heavy on the other one. So we saw Wiggins have, high exposure. Last game, he ended up doing pretty well. I mean, he had 7.5 DK points. It wasn't like a crazy explosion, but, played pretty well. And I think it's 6'8", on DraftKings, and he's even cheaper on FanDuel. He's got to be interesting again just because of his usage rate. And he's like a really high usage guy without Levine. The question is Robertson matchup, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, at this point, I'm hoping Levine plays just so I don't really have to make that decision of that extreme usage rate bump with Levine off the court. But yeah, Robertson's there. I just don't want to run into a scenario where I spend up on Wiggins and then he scores 20 points and finishes with 21. Points, like he usually does. Yeah, he's crap. But so I don't know. I think it's tough with this slate. Small forward is not great. Yeah, if you're not spending up on LeBron against the Kings, nobody else is even close to him in price range. So I think you can get away with Wiggins pretty easily. If Levine's out, I still think the volume will be there. The minutes we know will be there. This game's not looking like it's gonna be a blowout or anything like that. So I think it's fine still. But deep down, I'm kind of just hoping Levine plays, so I don't really have to go Wiggins.
I'm in the same ballpark. I just want Levine to be in just so I don't have to make that decision. Because if that's the case, you play both of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I would like to do. Yeah.
I mean, I think that you could go, some small Levine exposure in tournaments if he played, like really low. Because he'll be minusculely owned. He will.
Yeah, and he's going to go 40 minutes because Tibbs doesn't care.
Yeah.
Oh, you're healthy enough to go through shoot around. Or 41 minutes tonight.
Right, and I would assume Levine would get the depot, 3 minutes opposed to Robertson. So definitely interesting. But if Levine is out, Wiggins definitely, you have to look at him even with the Robertson matchup. Let's talk, these other guys, particularly Cat and Rubio, and something we've been discussing just as far as correlations go. Cat has very extreme home away splits. He's an elite play at home, sort of just an average DFS asset away. And he's played 2 games in a row at home and has crushed. And, one of the higher correlations on the team is him and Rubio. Rubio also, as the result, has significantly better home splits, and Rubio has just been diamond away. Cat's of his field goals in the last 2 games, 75% of them have been assisted. So very direct correlation there. But, this is a pretty tough spot against Steven Adams. So it's one of those things where you have to decide whether you're fine with Cat at home against Steven Adams, and you can determine your Rubio exposure.
Yeah, Cat's looked good in this matchup in the previous 2 games. And like you mentioned, the previous 2 games they played, not against the Thunder, they've both been fantastic. And that correlation has definitely been there with tournaments. If the last 2 games you went both these guys, it's looking really good, both over 40 or whatever.
They won tournaments, both nights.
Yeah. So I like that. Again, I like running it back, but I'm not going to go crazy with it or anything. But they're definitely the 2 most intriguing guys for me on a tournament level of individually, both these guys performing well lately and performing well in this matchup. Rubio missed the first game against them, I believe, first or second. But Cat's looked good in both, and I think it's beatable for him down low. So tournament plays only, but my 2 favorite tournament plays on this team.
Last guy, Jang, is he sort of in cash discussion on FanDuel?
He kind of gets in these spots once a week, I feel like, where you're looking at power forward and Cat's under 6K or whatever, or Jang, I guess I'll go Jang. I've done it a decent amount of time. He's 35% owned in 50-50s, and you're like, wow, I didn't even want to go him, but everybody just comes to the same conclusion of at least he gets minutes. Yeah, if he gets 35 minutes, he's at 53. He won't draw the Steven Adams matchup, I would assume. So, it's not awful. No, it's not. That's really, really cheap for a guy who plays that many minutes. And on this slate, you're not really going to want to pay up in too many spots. They're either in not ideal matchups, blow up potential guys like DeRozan, Toronto guys, but it's really tough. It's a really tough slate, so it puts these guys into stronger cash plays because you're kind of looking for minutes and solid performance and just kind of a per dollar basis, and 5,300 on FanDuel is just too cheap. So he's an option. He's not my number 1, but down to actually making a lineup and figuring out who you're going at shooting guard and small forward, and you have to pay up at those positions just to avoid landmines, then that makes Jang.
I think he's fine. Yeah, he really is. Yeah. He's missed value in his last 2 games, but he's also only got 5 minutes. He just had a miss because of the rotation with the elites and all these guys. But if he's going to get 35 minutes, which is where he had been at the last forever before these last 2 games, 53 is really tough. Let's move on to our positional breakdowns. We'll run through, obviously, point guard through center and talk about our favorite plays, some tournament options we like as well. Starting with point guard, this is an interesting position. I think it's a slate, like we mentioned, to potentially fade Russ at his really high salary on both sides. And there's also a lot of guys that are in really nice spots here. Just sort of running down the list. You have Isaiah Thomas at Atlanta. You can roll that game back with Dennis Schroeder. Both of those teams have been, 2 of the bottom 6 teams against point guards, running a trend on our trends tool. Lowry gets Brooklyn. Obviously, that's tough with that spread, but I mean, obviously, an elite matchup against Whitehead and Dinwiddie, not great defenders there. And then Kemba gets Philadelphia, which obviously has moments of being a good defensive team.
They're legit, man.
I think McConnell is pretty solid, and since he's been starting, they've been better. But I think that's still a matchup Kemba could win, and at only 8-1 on FanDuel, I think that he's in play in tournaments as well. But I think Isaiah Thomas is a guy that you really got to look at in this spot for cash games, especially. But there's a lot of intriguing guys at point guard, sort of in that mid to sort of high range.
Yeah, if you're looking at a slate, you're just starting and you kind of look at point guard and you go down the list, and you're like, oh, this slate is awesome. Like,
yeah, you get to the other positions.
I wish I could play 6 of them. And yeah, right. It's a shooting guard, and it's an absolute nightmare. Small forward, a nightmare. But yeah, point guard is going to be, I think, kind of where you're really going to have to choose which of these. There's so many good options. You really have to pick these right. But I agree. I think it starts with Isaiah, with Avery Bradley ruled out in the last 3 games. He's averaging 24 field goal attempts a game. We know the matchup is good against Schroeder. Should be able to pick up a steal or 2, which will really add to his value as he doesn't do that regularly. The Hawks allow the second most steals this season. Schroeder turns it over a lot. Atlanta's been the 3rd best opponent or plus matchup for opposing point guards, projected at least 15 points. The only downside I could think of is, before the pod we mentioned, the sneaky ejection possibility if he slaps Dennis Schroeder in the head again after the playoffs last season.
That's right. Yeah, and we were talking about before the pod, Schroeder even made a comment about it, right?
Yeah, that's what brought me to – I was like, I don't remember that. But, yeah, I mean, that's what a year does to you. But the playoffs, yeah, Isaiah slapped him in the head, and Schroeder's – he's going to be out for revenge. So it's going to get chippy, but I like Schroeder a lot too in this spot. It's more of a tournament play for sure. Isaiah is the cash play here, but great spot, and that's kind of the guy I'm looking to start with. And then I think McConnell, I know his price continues to rise, but he averaged 30 FanDuel points in his last 5 games in 35 minutes a game, over 35. So minutes, if the minutes are going to keep being there, I'm fine rolling him out because he's the anti-Damian Lillard. He produces in every other category except scoring. So he gets rebounds, he gets 2 assists, he's getting 2 steals a game. So it's not just points you're worried about. He's doing all the secondary stats, and he'll get you 4 points, whatever. But 6 rebounds, 6 dimes, steals. There's your value right there. So he's a guy I'm still looking at. And then I think another guy I think is pretty underpriced in a sneaky good spot tonight is George Hill. With KCP doubtful, the Pistons are losing. They're by far their best perimeter defender. They played late last night. We'll get into kind of the Jazz more in this spot, but I'm pretty high on Utah. They have 3 days rest, and I'm not expecting the Pistons to really come out looking too good in this one.
Yeah, especially with KCP out, we would assume that KCP would have taken that George Hill matchup with Reggie being on probably Hood or whoever they are rolling out at that shooting guard spot. Hill definitely gets a bump, and he's pretty nice on FanDuel. Like he's like 6K, 6-1 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Hill's really cheap, so I think it's a pretty good spot there. And then Marcus Smart, I think again, it's just he's a volatile player even at this price. I do like this spot. And it's kind of tough to save at the position, so I think that makes him a pretty strong play.
So we talked about this big spread game. It's the highest total game, but the Nets and the Raptors at 223.5, but the spread is 16. But on DraftKings, where Kyle Lowry is 8.5, talk me out of using Lowry in cash. I mean, if you look at his last couple games where he has had a large spread, and he put up 64 DK points against the Lakers. He dominated the Brooklyn Nets. Last time he put up like 50 DK points against the Nets last time they played a couple weeks ago. Dominated the Blazers last time they played. Just been really solid lately, and it's been fine in large spread games. I mean, I know this is really large spread game, so maybe it's tough, but at 8.5, like it's begging you to take him.
I know. We have a couple spots like this tonight. The other player will come to me later. I think it's power forward is priced down. But yeah, the sites are using dynamic pricing and factoring in the spreads and everything, really, the matchups, lower prices. But it makes it really hard, and this is a good thing for sure. I think we don't want everybody to have the same players, especially in NBA when your whole team is 50% owned or above in cash games or even tournaments. So I think when they do this, it's really good as a player to evaluate. Lowry, that price is too cheap, but you're worried about the spread. It just makes you think and make more difficult decisions. I think at this price, I like it. I'm fine going him, but when you look at the remainder of the positions and where you're spending up, I don't know if you can really comfortably go 8,500 there. And you have Hill 2,500 less, closer spread. So I don't know. I'm fine with him for now, putting him in there, because I agree it's too cheap. And you look at the actual matchup, it's incredible. So I think as long as this game isn't a 30-point blowout midway through the third quarter, I think Lowry should be pretty fine.
I agree. Yeah, I think right now I'm entertaining cash just because of that price point. But definitely tough. Hitting on just a couple other tournament plays, I think that this sort of seems more like a LeBron game, especially with his recent comments about the refs and the fact that they blew this game after a tough travel day against the Blazers in Portland. So it seems like a LeBron, like let me right the ship, Daddy LeBron. But Kyrie, I mean, like he's fine. He's sort of relatively equally priced across both sites, but his matchup against Sacramento is a good one. So I think he'd have some tournament exposure. And then a guy I really like actually on DraftKings, even though he has not a great matchup against Patrick Beverley, is Conley. I think that his price point at 7-1 and how he's been playing, sort of regardless of matchup, at least is intriguing for some low ownership despite the matchup against Bev.
I agree. I'm pretty high on Conley for tournaments. I like taking these spots where a cash game mindset will quickly write off someone like Conley going against Bev. I just don't play players against this guy, but we all know you can still have big games in certain matchups. And Conley, especially this season, has shown he murders Chris Paul every game, shoots 8 for 9 from 3. But he put up 38.75 last game in this matchup. Beverly played 33 minutes in that one. It's just, you just evaluate, it's just a tough spot against Bev. Bev's been playing a great D all season, but I think you still want some exposure. Conley's just been going off lately. So I think you definitely need some, and you'll get him at really we should get him at pretty low ownership.
Right. Okay, let's move on. Quick shout out Malcolm Brogdon. He's
always got to shout out Brogdon. Yeah.
I don't love his prices at this point, but you still got to appreciate what he's been doing. Played really well against the Spurs last game. So if you play well against the Spurs, you deserve some respect.
Steal of the draft.
Yeah, he's rookie of the year. Well, relative to this draft, Embiid is obviously going to win it.
Right.
Even though he's been a rookie for like 7 years.
Yeah.
Let's move on to shooting guard. Where are you looking here? And I think it's sort of interesting if you just look at the price points. Like on DraftKings, you have a guy like Batum sort of really stands out. But then McCollum is really low on DraftKings sort of relative to some of these other guys and where he is on FanDuel. So where's shooting guard sticking out to you?
It's really, really terrible. But yeah, on DK for sure, McCollum stands out quite a bit at that price. But it's just generally a very tough position to break down today because you have Harden in a tough spot, DeRozan in that huge blowout priced up. You have injury concerns with Levine. Eric Gordon is probable. KCP who's doubtful. Even Giannis, we saw last game, he played 8 minutes. I think he's doing a lot better, but it's still kind of a risk there with his illness. He's not cheap. So you have guys priced up, injury concerns, tough matchups, and really no cheap guys. We don't have Jeremy Lamb. We don't have any really cheap options. Hardaway's been okay, but we have Kyle Korver making his debut. So it's very, very difficult. And this is kind of going back to the Thunder game we talked about with Depot. He kind of just becomes a play. And it kind of just depends on your salary allocation of your lineup. If you can get McCollum on DK, that's great. I would try to, but you're just going to have to save at these other positions. But, yeah, I think shooting guard is the hardest position for today.
Are we expecting Batum to be back?
Yeah, Batum is playing.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite options too. I would love to go him. You have the minutes are there, the production.
On DK, was he 6'9" on DK? Something like that? 6'9" on DK, in the spot against Philly is nice.
7.5 on FanDuel. Yeah, for sure. The one thing with Philly, they do have the best defensive rating this month out of all the teams in the league. So
yeah, and I would assume Covington would take Batum, who Covington's been an awful shooter, but he's been excellent defensively.
no, Covington's one of the best this season for sure. So yeah, that's the other thing. It's like I don't really like the spot that much for Batum, but
I don't. But like, if you're just looking at opponent plus minus in our models, like no shooting guard has a good one today.
right, yeah,
So,
that's
like,
what I'm saying.
You're going to have to take a shooting guard in a bad spot. Like that's just
Pretty much. And you're going to want a guy who profiles as a high floor, and that's Batum, who contributes multiple categories. So I think he's certainly up there, especially at 6,900 on DK.
Right.
5 on FanDuel. A little bit more difficult, but you also have more cap to work with. So either way, the more I look at it, the more I kind of want to spend up kind of on these Batum, McCollum guys and really save, although – we'll see how the injuries fall and if anybody opens up, but it's pretty tough right now. And then I think Harden, you can dismiss on the slate for cash at least. He's averaged 38.6 FanDuel points in his last 3 games versus the Grizzlies. I know their D has been slipping quite a bit, especially lately, but he's just going to be mainly tournament exposure for me.
Yeah, no, he is for me too. And he's the same sort of issue with DeRozan. Like their price points in their matchups, DeRozan's is great, but it's almost too good, and Harden's is too bad. And look at their price points. It's just tough to go them in cash. You definitely should have some term exposure because of their high ceilings. DeRozan in particular.
DeRozan for sure. The matchup's fantastic. The pace, even with Lowry, both those guys, the pace is so good for both of them. And you're really just fading the blowout. So I think it's pretty big to still have term exposure because –
especially on DK for DeRozan, where he's 8.7. He's like up at 9.5 or 9.4 on FanDuel. So definitely not a situation you want to really target. So one guy that's particularly interesting, you mentioned Gordon is going to play. We would assume that Harden is going to get the bulk of Tony Allen minutes. And Gordon usually plays off the bench anyway, so he might avoid Tony Allen. But Tony Allen's been starting. He will probably – I would assume that they're going to mirror his minutes to put him on Harden as much as possible. So Gordon, doesn't have an awful matchup, and he's, semi like he's okay. His price point, he's going to get 30 minutes, and he's in the 5K range. Like with how brutal shooting guard is, if you're just looking for some tournament guys, like he's worth a shot.
No, I agree. It's really ugly shooting guard, and Gordon's still, I think, underpriced. He goes 30 a game, so 900 is just too cheap. So I don't mind it. It's just the coming back first game, but I agree with you. Kind of break down the game with Harden being not locked up, but defended most of the game by Tony Allen. That should allow Gordon to roam around and get some open looks for sure.
Yeah. Well, one last guy to mention, you okay with any little Rodney Hood exposure in this, Detroit team that's probably just so tired?
Yeah, I don't mind it. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty high on all the Jazz guys. Very well rested. I think the Pistons are just a disaster without KCP. He's huge to their team. And second night of a back-to-back. Game ended late last night, travel. So, definitely I don't mind exposure. We'd mentioned trying to figure out who was going to start for the Detroit. Last time KCP was out, it was Hilliard that got the start, right? Aaron Hilliard. Yeah. Stanley Johnson started the second half last night, so we'll see.
Could be either one of those guys.
I would guess it's Hilliard again, but he's been horrible.
He's been horrible, but that's sort of the Hood thing. Is KCP's out, Hilliard would probably be on Hood.
Right. Yeah, the whole team is just going to be slow, and I'm liking the Jazz quite a bit in this spot.
For sure. All right, let's move on to small forward. I think this is another fairly tough. This slate, man, it's tough here.
So bad. Friday the 13th.
Right. Yeah. For sure. So it's headlined by LeBron at the top. He's significantly the most expensive guy at 9.9, and then right below him, or not right below him, but 3,000 below him is Gordon Hayward, who is a really tough opponent plus minus. But again, like we're talking about that, like the Pistons defensive metrics and opponent plus minus with KCP out and with how late that game was on a road back-to-back in Utah. Like that's just that's about as brutal as it gets. So we're thinking that maybe those defensive metrics are a little misleading. So
Yeah, they are.
So what are your thoughts on those two top guys, LeBron and Hayward in particular?
Yeah, this is such a weird. This is a 9-game slate, right? 9. Yeah, 9 games, and we have only one small forward priced above 7,500. It's Braun. So usually I'd try really, really hard to get Braun in there, just because the disparity between him and the next few guys is
his projected floor is almost twice as much.
Yeah, he hasn't been going off or anything, but the Kings played a slow pace. But I like the spot for him still quite a bit coming off that loss. So I'm fine targeting LeBron pretty heavily on this slate for sure.
Especially with like Russ and Harden, like just being sort of fades in their matchups. LeBron, he's not that expensive. I mean, he's at 9.9 on FanDuel. Like that's manageable.
Yeah, Hayward is more of a tournament play for me. Braun's the guy I want to spend up 3 more K or whatever it is to cash him. And then you kind of just get into that maybe 4K to 5,500 as your small forward 2 on FanDuel. It's pretty tough. There are some options. I think one guy who's very intriguing, and it kind of goes against what I've been saying with the Pistons and the brutal match against Jazz, but Marcus Morris, I'm definitely intrigued in with his minutes, and he gets a pretty significant increase with KCP off the court this season. So at his cheap price, that's an option I'm looking at. It was tournaments only, but now just kind of looking at all the other guys who also have risks, he's definitely in there for cash for me, just at that cheap price point. And then you kind of get into guys like Covington, we mentioned briefly on the defensive end, but Charlotte's been the 3rd most favorable to opposing small forwards this season. He's gotten big minutes lately for Covington, very cheap. So that's kind of an option by default. And you get into Bogdanovich, a guy I generally don't like to play. He's underpriced. And then we mentioned Harkless earlier, but these are kind of
Harkless is looking nice as a cash game option right now.
Yeah, like these are the guys you're looking at. So it's kind of ugly. And then if you want to spend a bit more, you get into Hayward, Aaron Gordon. I think is a tournament play only. We mentioned he's not facing Austin Rivers again, who he has 5 inches on, and then Batum on FanDuel. We mentioned.
MKG would be in cash if Batum wasn't returning tonight, but I think that he's a fade with that.
Agree. Yeah, so it's tough. I think it just makes you want LeBron a lot more. And you mentioned with Russ and Harden kind of in not great spots, because
especially on FanDuel, like if you have to roster 2 small forwards, like you can find one guy that you like outside of, like in the lower range, but like I'm not rostering 2 guys that are not LeBron.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's brutal,
Yeah, it's not smart. Yeah,
for sure. And then we talked about Wiggins. Obviously, that has a lot to do with the Levines. Yep. So we'll get in. We've already talked about that. But what are your thoughts on Covington?
Yeah, I mentioned him. Yeah. He's in the mix. He's there with Harkless and Marcus Morris. But that's the guy we're kind of looking for on this slate in a lot of these positions, is a guy who gets big minutes. Right. Is underpriced relatively, and you kind of pick your spots on where you're spending for kind of rock solid guys like Isaiah and LeBron. So these are unfortunately the filler guys on this slate and this position that you're going to have to consider.
If there's ever going to be a repeat of a 50-point Terrence Ross game, wouldn't it be against Brooklyn?
Yeah, I looked at him earlier. Yeah, I think 3,300 on DK or around in the 3s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't mind some 38.
38,
I don't mind tournament exposure, some T Ross.
Yeah, like if it's a 20-point game in the second quarter, just put in Ross, let him go to work, man. Just transition buckets all day.
Right.
Corey Brewer style. Any other guys you want to talk about here? Or you want to move to
Not really.
It sucks.
It's the worst it's been in a while, and for a 9-game slate, it's really disappointing.
For sure. All right, well, let's move on to power forward, and we'll keep on rolling through this. So where are you looking at? I mean, I think that there's at least some more interesting guys in this this position. We talked about some of these guys like Ibaka and stuff like that. But a guy who has a really nice matchup and is sort of relatively cheap on FanDuel, if you can get to him, or on DraftKings, is Millsap.
Yeah, I'm still high on Millsap. You definitely get that high floor that a lot of players at this position can't really compete with. But you're right; it's going to be a problem to spend up, especially on DK. I know he's cheap, but you also have limited value there as is already. So it's definitely tough. Not really what I'm immediately looking at, just because I'm kind of just being realistic and can't go every top guy at each position. But he's probably my favorite play. At power forward, and kind of get in is similar to small forward and shooting guard with you just have a lot of guys in that mid-tier range, price range, where I don't love any of them, but you're going to play them. So Ilyasova has been quietly really good lately. You got Nerlens, who's cheap and playing better, but the floor I'm a little worried about with the minutes downside there. Jabari's been playing really well, but I don't love the spot for him. He shot 5 for 20 first game against the Heat this season. And then you kind of get into your Zebos, Tobias Harris, brutal spot for him. I'm pretty much off him entirely.
So we've been talking about, this Pistons Utah game. Favors is a guy we've been talking about who's had lower minutes, but I mean the talent. Like if he's Favors, his talent is a 7-8K guy, sort of in the the upper range, and he's still only 4.7 on FanDuel. I mean, it's like not super great, but I mean, like if you're sort of looking at this range, like Favors is at 4.7, Jang is at 5.3. I mean, this is like sort of the mid-range decisions you're gonna have to get into here.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult. I agree. Yeah, Favors, it's disappointing because you kind of watch him and he has a good game and his minutes are trending upwards. He goes back to 24, 25 minutes and has a very mediocre game. And it's tough to kind of cash him at this point, but that price is still so appealing. Every time you see 4,700 next to Favors and you have that 30-minute upside that he's shown recently, then it makes me like him quite a bit. I just don't know if it's safe enough. But then when you compare him to some of these other guys, they all have their downsides as well, whether it's matchup or minutes or price. So he's in the mix. I mean, as of now, I really don't know who I'm going. I don't know who kind of the chalk will be at this position at this point. But I think by default, you kind of look at the same guys. You have Jang, we mentioned earlier, 5,300 with those minutes. It's nice. And it's probably going to be the spot where I'm going to pick two of these kind of mid-range guys and go off whoever's safest.
So I'm pretty high on Kevin Love tonight, just as a little pivot down from Millsap. But if you just look at the potential matchups in this game, Sacramento's actually been playing smaller lately, and they've been playing well because they've stopped this. What they did at the beginning of the year, they were playing two centers, whether it was Boogie with Koufis or playing all of these like 400 centers that they have on their roster, Cauley Stein or whoever. But they've decided to move Boogie to 5 sort of full time, and they've been playing Anthony Tolliver at the 4, shift Rudy Gay down to 3. So doing both of those, Rudy Gay, Tolliver, sort of the 3-4, depending on how you look at things. I assume Gay will probably take LeBron, which means that Tolliver, I assume, will be on Kevin Love, and Tolliver is a guy who was in his 30s. He's like 6'7", 6'8". Stretch power forward, but I don't think in any position to be able to defend Kevin Love. So just one-on-one matchup wise, Love might have the best one on the slate. So at least something to think about.
Agree. Yeah, no, Love is really nice, of course. I guess, it depends kind of where you're spending up. I think on FanDuel, you can definitely get away with affording Love at this spot. I don't think we'll get into the center next, but I don't think you need to pay top dollar there. LeBron's not even that expensive if you go him, and then you're automatically saving with small forward too because no one else is expensive. So I think you maybe sacrifice going expensive on both shooting guards, for example, and get Kevin Love just because that floor has elevated him and Millsap compared to some of these other guys that are very volatile. Cantor, Zebo, even Favors. So I agree. I think Love is up there as a top cash option for sure.
Yeah. On DK, Aminu's looking pretty nice now that I'm, looking again through these positions. 5.3 on DK. I mean, he's been really good lately. He's crushed value, and he's been over 30 DK points in his last 4. Playing against this small ball lineup of the Magic.
Yeah, it's good for him that the Magic are going small. Minu's minutes are very safe here. I don't know, man. I just never go Minu that much, but he's been highly owned on FanDuel.
He's been crushing lately.
He has, but it's like he's not a new player. He's not doing anything. He's playing. He's rebounding incredibly well. That's what it is.
Yeah,
his rebounds are up so much, but yeah, I guess on FanDuel his price jumped so much. I haven't really looked at him too much for DK, but you're right at 5,300. The way he's been performing, bring down the faster pace, small ball matchup, then I can get behind some Aminu over there.
For sure. All right, let's finish up with center, Jay. And some interesting plays here. If we just start with DK and we'll move to FanDuel. This might be the one you're talking about where the slate's just begging you to take him because Marcus Gasol is 6'9". That seems like the slam dunk play of the slate.
Yeah, it's just way too cheap. I was talking about Drummond though. That's the guy. Yeah, on FanDuel they're begging you to take.
Yeah, on FanDuel. Yeah, Gasol's sort of that way on DK, but Drummond that way on 7-2.
Yeah, I'm not falling for it though against Gobert. But yeah, on the other hand, Gasol 99% bargain rating on DK is just too cheap, 6,900. So I'm not gonna overthink it too much. If you want to go two centers, you can for sure. But Gasol's going to be my number one there. And then FanDuel, I still am on that Embiid train. He said his ankle's fine. Charlotte gets their shots blocked quite a bit this season. Embiid resting tomorrow, went through shoot around. So not worried about that. Still don't mind his price point relative to the other centers and kind of the matchups we got there. So I think Embiid's where I'm starting on FanDuel. I'm still fine with Greg Monroe. That's a great spot against Miami. So I still like Monroe quite a bit.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think he profiles just let me pull up this game. He profiles more as the cash gameplay to me. Well, no, I guess he has a pretty nice ceiling lately. I'm definitely fine with that. I obviously like the matchup against Miami. They've been awful against centers, sort of regardless of who has been in there, whether it's been Willie Reed or Hassan Whiteside. So I think that he's definitely in play. I would not go him over. I don't think I'd go him over Steven Adams. Steven Adams is 200 less. Where would you go there?
Yeah, that's really close.
Yeah, it is pretty close.
It sucks, man. This slate, it's just this is a slate I wish we could just have you have eight spots and
just go point guards and centers.
I'd go 4 point guards and 4 centers, and then you're good. But, centers loaded. You're right. I like Adams a lot. You've Gasol underpriced and Embiid, Monroe. So they're all really nice. But I think in cash, the cash plays I'm sticking with and targeting are Embiid on FanDuel and Gasol on DK, but I'm totally fine with Steven Adams too.
What are your thoughts on, again, we'll just touch on everyone in this lineup. What are your thoughts on Gobert against Drummond?
Yeah,
he's pretty darn cheap on DraftKings. He's 6'5". So he's he's one guy that I identified, both him and sort of Plumlee in the game that we talked about before, is if you want to pivot off probably the high ownership of Gasol, Gobert is just a little bit lower than Gasol, and Plumlee's about 1,000 less than that. So interesting tournament plays. And you could even throw Horford in, who we can talk about now as well. Horford's just 100 less in this revenge game against.
Yeah, first revenge game. Yeah, this position's really just full of tournament plays. I like a lot of these guys, but they also profile as cash plays if you're not comfortable going Gasol. Even Plumlee, Gobert is a cash play. I think. Yeah, price.
Plumlee is too. Yeah.
Plumlee. So you just have a ton
Steven Adams. These guys. Steven Adams, Monroe. I think. Monroe might be a little more tournament.
I would probably go 2 centers on DK. I'm thinking with some of these guys underpriced and good spots, and you look at the other positions, and it's not great. You also have point guards pretty deep too. So either way, I think you're going 3 point guards or 3 centers, which is pretty typical most sites anyway. So that's nothing new. But I think you get into just some more tournament plays. We can talk about Whiteside, who just went off against the Warriors.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Whiteside and Boogie Cousins and Joel Embiid. These are guys we haven't even mentioned yet.
I know it's loaded. Dwight, Boston's 28th in rebounds per game this season. So
if we had positionless positions to use, I might just take all centers.
I know it's stacked, especially relative to these other positions that are just. I don't want to go Harkless and cash. But yeah, I think these are tournament. Yeah, Roberts. A lot of good tournament plays at this position. Yeah. I don't know who's kind of like your top guy when you factor in
projected
points and ownership. Yeah,
that's a good question. Yeah, because Gasol is just so nice, but he's so expensive as well. Whiteside, maybe? Is that crazy?
No, it's not crazy at all going against the Bucks. Yeah, I agree. You look at ceiling with a lot of these guys, and Whiteside's up there, but like you also have Vooch, I think is a great tournament play. It's loaded, and then we haven't even gotten into the strongest play is Boban.
Yeah, well, that's what you were talking about with Drummond, and I was like, why would you go Drummond when you could just go the superior center, Boban.
Yeah, man. 2 massive games in his last 4. The back-to-back.
Is he a downgrade for Gobert is the question.
Yeah, man.
He is, for sure.
Boban's going to eat Gobert.
Gobert's like the longest dude in the world, and Boban's like the size.
Yeah. No, it's not a good spot. I don't know. I love Boban more than anybody, but it's
he's not going to get enough minutes against Gobert. It's brutal.
I wouldn't think so, but
there's a lot. If you're just looking sort of at the studs, we've obviously talked about Monroe and Adams and all these guys in the mid-tier range, but just like the studs. Cousins is obviously fine in tournaments. I don't think Cleveland is just a brutal matchup. Towns
for sure, but yeah,
Towns has it's tough, for sure against Tristan, but Towns has got those crazy home splits.
Mm-hmm.
Whiteside against Milwaukee. Gasol is just so cheap and in a good matchup against Houston. Embiid, I think, can dominate Charlotte. And then you got Dwight. Literally all these guys are in great spots. So I think the play is to find the guys that you're comfortable with in the sort of the middle 3 spots with shooting guard, small forward, and power forward. Find a small core there, and then you can use our diversification meter. You can do whatever and really rotate these guys in tournaments.
I agree, and do the same for point guard. So yeah, I like that idea a lot. You go in on your certain, maybe lock LeBron in 50 lineups out of your 50 or whatever, and
maybe more than that.
Yeah, and then get some diversification going with point guard and center, which have a lot of guys. You can definitely take stands on these guys too. I recommend it, but there are a lot of guys I like quite a bit. So I think the big thing is just if you're doing that to kind of shy away from the chalkier plays because they're all really nice. So
we didn't even talk about I like Valanciunas in this spot. This is guys that didn't even get mentioned, but I know tournament exposure to him against Brooklyn.
Yep. Yeah. If you look at everything, kind of just don't attach any names really, and look at everything. There shouldn't be a chalky play theoretically.
Right.
There's so many guys in good spots. You look at just the data, strictly data, matchup, price, production, that they're all so nice. So when you eliminate ownership for a lot of these guys, it just makes them that much nicer when you're comparing them to Embiid's high ownership on FanDuel and Gasol's on DK.
Yeah. And in cash games, I would recommend getting the guys that you're most comfortable with in those other positions. And then, if you have enough to get up to Gasol, that's fine. And if you don't,
you have a lot to work with.
Let your salary dictate where you go because you're probably going to be fine in any salary range.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy with a lot of these guys. So loaded position. I wish we could go more than one on FanDuel.
Yeah, definitely 2 on DraftKings. Tough if you want to get a bunch of point cards in, but interesting slate for sure. I'm glad we got to do a pod today, just because I think it, just from a game theory perspective, both for cash games and tournaments, it's an intriguing one, even if it's not an amazing one.
Yeah, and we haven't ran a trend. I think I might do that today of players on Friday the 13th. That has to be a trend,
right? Yeah, I'm Boban, maybe.
Yeah, he's going to end the league tonight.
Yeah, for sure.
Gobert.
It'd be amazing. All right, well, everyone, thank you for listening. As always, we appreciate your guys' feedback, and we hope to see you guys at the top of the leaderboards. Interesting slate, but I think a good one. So good luck tonight, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Yeah, good luck, guys.